If you're considering Bitcoin as a corporate treasury asset, you're worried about your cash or treasuries or other assets in relation to how well they're maintaining their value. You have a shareholder obligation to return as much value to your shareholders as possible. I would argue that losing 15% a year on your cash, your devaluation, is probably not as important. Well, probably offsets the green concerns, at least initially. Maybe if you, I probably should unpack that a little bit. Since 2020, the M2 money supply in the US has increased 26%, which means 26% of all dollars in circulation were printed since February 2020. If you go since 2008, the G4 central banks have increased their balance sheet 618%, which averages out to be like 13% a year on an annualized basis. And that equates to a devaluation of fiat currency around 15%. Now, some of it, it's definitely not that linear, but that averages out. If you think about that, that makes any cash assets you have or treasury assets really not that interesting. Even if it's fixed income, it's just not keeping pace with the scale at which we're expanding balance sheets. And it's interesting. There's some great graphs. If you take the S&P 500 across the Fed balance sheet, it looks flat relative to the central bank balance sheet. So when you think about, does it impact the use case of Tesla, which is an early adopter, commenting on the green energy, I think that it would. However, there are more pressing concerns for a lot of the corporate treasurers at the moment, and returning shareholder value, preserving their purchasing power are most likely in the top of mind, at least in the top concerns for them. And that's where they're likely focused. And whether it's Bitcoin or other types of assets like gold, the market, whether it's treasurers, individual investors, even institutions, are looking for alternatives to get into outside, differently than bonds or differently than cash or fixed income. And there's that rotation happening. So I think Michael Saylor talks about it as he's sitting on a melting ice cube. He's built all this value and it just is melting up from underneath him. So that pressing issue about what do you do with your corporate treasury still exists, independent of if there's a concern of the green impact of Bitcoin.